Hey there, welcome back to the channel. And today we're gonna make this animation. I had a lot of fun making it, so I really hope that you guys like it too. So yeah, let's get right into it. Alright, so we have a default Blender scene here, and to start with, I'm gonna click on A and delete everything so that we have this blank canvas to start with. I'm gonna do a Shift A, add a text, and I'll add my channel's name. You guys can go with whatever you want to. Alright. Okay, so now that we have the text in our scene, let's quickly go ahead and change the alignment for this. For that, I'm going to click on this object data properties with a on that and click on paragraph alignment and just go ahead and change horizontal and vertical alignment to the center, right? And once I'm done with that, I'll do RX90 just to make it stand straight on the x-axis, right? And then we'll do a GZ and bring it right above the axis. And I guess we are pretty much ready to add some geometry into our object, right? So for that, I'm going to click on this geometry option, and in the extrude, I'm going to put 0.1 meter, right? And this looks a good enough number, and let's go ahead and add a depth of 0.01. Now this text just looks plain, so I'm going to go ahead and change the font for the text. For that, I'll click on font. Click in the regular section. I'm just going to go ahead and search for a good font that works with it. I think this looks pretty okay, so I'm going to go with this. Now we are done with creating our text, so I'm going to click on my text and right click on convert to, and then mesh. And as soon as I do that, the A option goes away. Now our object is no longer a text, it is a mesh. So let's go ahead and make it a little bit better. Right now, if you see the geometry, it just looks odd. And if we displace this one, it's just gonna give us weird results, right? So we don't want that. So I'm gonna click on my text, click on this object data properties again, then click on remesh, and then change the voxel size to 0.009 and just click on voxel remesh. And as soon as I do that, can you see if I hop into the edit mode now, can you see the geometry of the entire text changed into quartz? And that's what we were going for, right? Because it's a pretty even geometry, and then it's going to give us a better result. So once we have taken care of that, now the next step would be to create that wavy pattern on which the text sits on. So for that, I'll do a Shift A, click on curve, and then add a Bezier curve in here, right? And let's scale it up a little bit, and we'll go into the edit mode, select the vertices, and click E for extrude. Just to extrude a little bit, I'm gonna rotate it just to create that wavy pattern, and I'm gonna click E for extrude again, and let's bring it up a little in the front. Let's bring this in the back a little bit, and I think this looks pretty okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my text on this curve now, right? So in order to do that, I'll click on my text, click on the modifier properties, and then click on add modifier curve. And in this, let's select the Bezier curve. As you can see, the text is already taking shape. So let's go to the object properties and let's move our text on the X location, bringing it in the center a little bit. And yeah, I think this looks pretty good enough. So the next thing we're going to do is we'll add that displacement in this. And to add displacement, the best modifier is the Displace Modifier, like duh. So we're going to add the Displace Modifier and then reduce the mid level to 0, reduce the displacement strength to 0.25, and then let's click on new to add a new texture in our displacement. I'm going to click on this option here to go to the texture settings and then change the type from image to distorted noise. And then change the noise basis from Blender Original to Improve Berlin and Distortion to Improve Berlin as well. And then let's increase the amount to 10 and let's bring down the size to 0. Yeah, so now we have that displacement that we saw in the original animation, but currently it's affecting everything, right? And we don't want that. So in order to do that, I'm going to add the node that, I'm going to add the modifier that's going to do the magic. So the modifier is called Vertex Weight Proximity Modifier. So let's add that, and I'll bring it above the displacement just to make sure that it's affecting the displacement. Now to work with this modifier, the first thing we need is a vertex group. Now to add a vertex group, I'm going to click on my object, go into the edit mode, click A to select everything, and go to the object data properties. And in this vertex group section, I'm going to hit this plus sign to add a new group and click on assign. Now, as soon as I do that, there is a vertex group created with all the vertices in this. So let's select that vertex group in here. Now it's asking for a target object. So let's quickly go ahead and add an empty to our scene. And this is the object that we're going to use as a target object, right? So let's go back and select our empty. Now, as you can see in the proximity mode, we have two options, that is object and geometry. So I'm going to click on geometry, and I'll also in the fall off change the type from linear to smooth, just to get a smooth transition. Now let's go to the displace modifier and change the vertex group to the group that we just created. It's already giving you the effect, but it's not quite what we want. So in this fall off section of the vertex weight proximity modifier, I'm going to go back and click on this invert fall off. As soon as I do that, can you see it's already creating that effect where it's only affecting a part of a mesh and not everything. And so all we need to do now is animate our empty, and that's going to go ahead and create that transition effect. So in order to do that, I'm going to just bring my empty a little bit higher so it's in the center of our text. So 0.25 seems okay. And for the X, let's move it back up to the point where it's not affecting anything. So right here, which is -3, do a right click, insert keyframe, and I want my animation to be about 100 frames. So I'm just going to change it to 100, come to 101 frames, and let's just move the empty right through our text by changing the x-axis value. And this is where it stopped affecting the object, right? So which is 3.5, and I'm just gonna add a keyframe again. All right, so our transition effect is created, and now the next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and create the textures, right? So for that, I'll just bring this down a little bit and add a new window here, and we'll bring up our shader editor and click on our object and click new to get a new material in here. Now we're gonna go ahead and delete the principal BSDF, and let's add glass BSDF in here, and I'll also add an emission shader. And to mix both of them, I'm going to add a mix shader, right? And let's bring it right between both these shaders and take the mix shader and put it into the surface. The glass BSDF will go to the bottom input of the mix shader, and emission will go to the top input. And let's also switch to the render mode. And yeah, let me quickly add an HDRI in here. All right, so now that we have the HDRI, we'll go ahead and enable some settings. So we'll go to our render properties, make sure the ambient inclusion, bloom, and screen space reflections enabled. Also click on film and just click on transparent to make the HDRI background transparent. And the last thing we'll do is we'll click on color management and change the look to very high contrast. This will just improve the render when we do it. Now the next thing we'll add in a texture is a color ramp. We'll take the color output from the color ramp and add it to the factor of the mix shader. Then let's add a layer weight node and take the facing output and add it to the factor of the color ramp. And we'll click on this drop down here, flip color ramp, and bring this white closer to the black and this black closer to the white. Just right until we only have a slight edge that is glowing. Let's increase the emission so that we can see it. So only the edges are glowing now, and that looks like a good point. So let's go ahead and add another noise texture in here, and we'll take the factor of the noise texture and add it to the blend of our shader. And for the glass BSDF, what we're going to do is we'll add some displacement in it, because right now it's just a plain text, which can look good, but I want a little bit more detail on that, right? So I'm going to add a Voronoi texture in here. I will take the distance and add it to the normal. Let's go ahead and add another node here, which is the bump node. And we'll take the Voronoi distance and plug it into the height of the bump node, and take the bump node and plug it into the normal, right? So we are already seeing displacements in here. Let's change the Euclidean to Chebyshev, and let's increase the scale a bit. So this looks pretty good to me. I'm gonna make sure that I do a Control T, just ensure that you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. Then take the object output and add it to the vector of the mapping node. Now, I think we are good enough as far as adding those bumps goes. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll go ahead and change the color of the emission, right? Right now it's plain white, it just does not look good. So let's add a color ramp in here and take the output of the color ramp and add it to the color of the emission shader. Now we'll also add another noise texture and take the factor and add it to the factor of the color ramp, and take the vector here and add it to the vector of this noise texture, and I'm gonna take the same vector and add it to the noise texture that is controlling the layer weight node as well. So once we have all of this set up, let's reduce the size of the noise texture that's controlling the layer weight node to about 3. I think looks good. And over here, let's change this color from white to a red-ish, and let's add another one, and let's make it lighter or darker red, right? So reduce the noise texture over here as well. I can see it, so let's bring this color ramp a little bit back so that we can see what's happening. Yeah, and you can add as many additions to the color ramp as you want. Every addition is going to give you a different effect, right? So I think this looks pretty good to work with. So we're going to go ahead and use this setup. I'll reduce the brightness of the color in the class PSDF just to make it a little bit darker so that we can see the emission a bit better. Right now, your texture is working with your emission. You can obviously play with this color ramp and reduce the amount of emission that's affecting your flow, but just by moving this white back and forth or playing with this section here, right? So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. This is how you create that texture. One bonus step though, that I rendered the original animation that you saw in cycles. Since I was using glass, cycles seems to be a better option to go ahead and use to create that realistic effect. And it was Cycles X, right? So if you don't know how to download Cycles X, I'm going to link down a video right at the top and in the description so you guys can check that out. I'll really recommend that because it's really, really fast as compared to the original Cycles. But that's about it. So thank you so much for hanging out so far, and I'll see you guys in the next video.